Okay, great. All right. Thank you, Tano, for this. So this work was mainly about student loneliness in universities, and we tried to explore the experiences of students when it comes to social connection, but also how they experience it in universities specifically. So, as you know, just a brief introduction on Neighbourly Lab for those who are new or joining us. Neighbourly Lab is a nonprofit that thinks about social connection and how to increase connections in communities. So this is right up our alley. The aim of the project for this particular setting, we worked with 4 universities, SOAS, Royal, Holloway, LSE, and Surrey, and we looked into how students experience social connection in universities if they are experiencing isolation and how the cost of living crisis is increasing this experience for them. And then we tried to think together and co-design solutions to address these issues. Our approach to this project, we had 4 phases. First of all, we kind of looked into the research around loneliness in universities specifically, and we did a little bit of context setting. And then we worked with student researchers to do a deep dive. We did fieldwork interviews to find out more about their experiences. And then we shared what we found out and tried to think of solutions to address student loneliness. And then finally, we wrote up a report and started sharing what we found out more widely because there was a lot of things that were very interesting about this, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. So we all know that loneliness is very important, and usually older people are at risk of facing loneliness. But we also found out that younger people who are in a transitional period in their lives, transitioning from school to universities, also are at risk to face severe loneliness. And then there are different student groups that are influenced more than others, or that might be more at risk than others. So as we know, younger people are the majority of what the student population is, but also students with disabilities, students from minorities or facing financial difficulties, as well as international students can be more at risk to face more loneliness in universities. And we know that loneliness affects physical and mental health, but also in the academic context, it affects academic performance and can lead to an increased number of students dropping out of universities. So a part of this project, we worked with the peer researchers, as I said before, to kind of think more about this project and how think more about this topic and how we can solve or design solutions to address loneliness. What we did is we recruited students from these different universities. We trained them up in how we do research and how we're going to design solutions together to kind of address this. We focused on the experiences. So the students then went out into their universities. They did fieldwork interviews with other students, and they tried to find out their experiences of social connection. What are the kind of challenges that students are facing? What are the things that are going well? And how is cost of living impacting them? And this was very key to our approach, and we were able to surface a lot more depth by having students conduct this work, as students felt that they can relate to each other and they can understand more of the nuances of their universities. And they'll share more about this when we have the conversation towards the end. After we did this work, we sat down, tried to analyze what we found out, and design the solutions. So coming on to what we found out, there were a lot of interesting and key ideas that came about. The kind of wider context and the wider themes, we looked at societies, social groups, and events, the academic context, the accommodation, whether people live in, nearby, or far away, the well-being support, or what support is there for students at universities, the physical infrastructure of the space itself. There are universities that are campus universities, universities that are smaller and more central. How does that impact loneliness? And then transport and how often students are coming into universities. And we found out that the kind of threads that are running across all of these, or impact all of these, is kind of cost of living and how um, things are communicated to students, how often students are engaged, what are the groups of students that are being engaged, are all different groups of students being engaged equally, what's the culture like in the university, and we found that everyone in the university plays a very huge role in kind of influencing this. So just to go in more detail about the different kind of themes that we found out when it comes to societies and social groups and events. So a lot of universities have a lot on offer, sports, some specialized kind of societies, different events. But we found out that kind of students have challenges accessing these events, either because of their timetables or because of the costs associated with that, or the academic pressure. And then when it comes to the academic context, we found that depending on the kind of course, there might be more pressure for students to achieve more things academically and have less time to socialize, or even the structure of the course itself doesn't really allow for time in between to kind of talk to students. And then when it comes to accommodation, we found that there are different experiences for students when they are living on campus versus living away from campus, or living nearby. So people who kind of live away might tend to socialize within their networks that they kind of know from school or from their town. Um, and that kind of ultimately influences how lonely they will feel at university itself. And then when it comes to the support, we found out that there's kind of students found that there's a complex process that goes on to accessing this kind of support. They don't know if there will be prioritized. They don't know how to kind of access the system that the university has. And then when it comes to kind of physical infrastructure, we found that it plays a very major role because students wanted more informal settings to kind of get together. They didn't necessarily always have the means to pay or wanted to go to the library and just be in a quiet space. So there was kind of a need of having these informal settings for students. And then transport. A lot of students were commuter students, so they would come in and out of uni, and that influences their experience greatly because some students, and as we know now, courses are designed to be online as well. So they would just opt for attending online, and that would ultimately lessen the amount they have to interact with other students or form connections in university. And all of these kind of come down to cost of living and the communication around what's on offer in universities. So the cost of living has a major impact because a lot of students had part-time jobs or couldn't commute as often as they would like, or couldn't stay for very long, or couldn't get accommodation in universities because of cost of living. And then socializing, whether it's in societies or after universities in cafes, just felt like an extra burden for them. And then how kind of the different things that university offers, whether it's well-being support or different societies that are maybe free to join. There was kind of a lot that was going on, but students didn't know exactly how to access this information. It just felt like things will get lost in translation. I think you've had enough of me talking now, but we'd love to I'd love to kind of introduce you to the peer researchers. And Tano, I'll hand it over to you to carry on this conversation, find out what the students explored in their universities.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rahaf. If you can stop sharing your screen so we can all see each other. Thank you for running us through that. That's really interesting. I think it's a particularly interesting conversation to be having post-COVID, because I know that the university experience has changed really, really significantly in the wake of that. Youth loneliness, I think, is a really sort of growing area of interest within the loneliness sector. And as you sort of alluded to earlier, um, a lot of recent research has found that young people are amongst the loneliest, and so the sort of in our quest to try and figure that out and understand it a bit better, I think that the process of peer research is a really, really valuable way to kind of hear from the people who have the lived experience and the sort of live understanding of this. So I'm very glad that Anissa, Anna, and Abby have agreed to take part in this and to come along and speak with us. Um, it sounds like a lot of the sort of issues are quite kind of large scale and structural around like cost of living, around communication. But I was glad when I was looking into the research to see that there are things that we can do and that there are kind of really localized solutions which you've sort of come up with. So to begin with, perhaps I could just ask you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit how you got involved in the research and your kind of personal interest in it. I'd like to do this alphabetically, but your names are actually quite close together, so I'm struggling. We'll start with Abby.
My name's Abby. I was one of the peer researchers at Surrey who took part in this project. And I came about it. It was advertised because through like psychology, I think it was mainly advertised to us, but it wasn't the case in other universities. But it was advertised through our course. And I was like, oh, that sounds like incredibly valuable, and I'd love to take part in the research. And yeah, between me, Anissa, and Becca, one of the other senior researchers at Neighbourly Lab, I think we conducted about 60 intercept interviews on campus, which was really valuable data because I think at the start we didn't actually we aimed to do like 30, 40 quicker ones, like 5, 10 minutes long tops. But the 60 interviews we conducted between the three of us ended up being like 15 minutes long. So it sort of eradicated the need to do in-depth interviews because we were like, oh, we've actually got much more rich data than we expected from the students, which was really like valuable and rewarding to see.
That's fantastic. So they were very sort of keen to share their views and take part when you gave them a
Absolutely,
chance.
yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Lots to come back to on that, but first, Anissa, could you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Denisa. I'm also one of the peer researchers from Surrey. I think, yeah, similar to Abby, the role was advertised through the uni, and I think like the job was like having peer research with like made such an incredible difference in the responses, like speaking to other students and making them comfortable enough to open up about their struggles with loneliness and their isolating experiences at university was like incredible to hear their testimonies. So yeah, I think peer research needs to be used more. But yeah, it was incredible experience.
Thank you. And Anna.
Hi everyone. So at the time when the project was conducted, I was third year student in biochemistry. I also heard about the opportunity through the university advertisement, and since I was interested in research in mental health, I thought it would be a very valuable opportunity to kind of be immersed into social research and actually participate and get experience. In this kind of project centered around mental health. We also conducted around 60 interviews, and it was a very valuable experience for me, not only for research experience, but also to get to know my peers at the university more and just feel more connected to the university community.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain sort of pleasant irony in that conducting a project around loneliness allows you to actually meet a lot of people and probably reduces loneliness. But that's neither here nor there. I would be interested actually just to get straight into what you heard when you were talking to all of these students and doing the intercept interviews. What sort of things did they tell you? What surprised you? What were you kind of expecting to hear? Did it align with that? Let's go backwards. Anna, we'll start with you.
So I was really surprised by the depth of the answers. First of all, everyone was actually really open to share about their own experiences with loneliness. And I think partially this was because we are peer researchers, so we do understand their experience, we can relate to them. and we have that common ground between us. Yeah, as Rahaf mentioned, there were several key themes which we explored, and there were definitely distinct key groups identified that were particularly exposed to the feeling of loneliness, which were commuting students, international students as well, and also those students that come from a low financial background. So I think we'll get into that later more.
Abby and Anissa.
Yeah, I think it was quite shocking to hear like how much the cost of living crisis had an impact on the student loneliness, especially in Surrey. Guildford is the area specifically which the uni is in. It's quite a high cost of living, um, similar to the London cost of living, but most students who were received student finance obviously received the lower band of it. So you know, a lot of people that were living on campus had to have part-time jobs in order to pay for their expenses, accommodation, and things like that. And that part-time job meant that they didn't have time to socialize, which then contributed to the loneliness. So I think it had such an incredible impact on most of the students there, which was quite shocking. And then as well with Surrey, there is quite a large commuter population. So, you know, you have one set of students who are living on campus and struggling with the cost of living. And then also those students who can't afford to live at uni and end up commuting are also experiencing loneliness because they're missing out on the social aspect of university, because the transport links are poor, events start later. There's all a complete other set of barriers that they're experiencing. So yeah, it was kind of it's quite sad to see that both sides are struggling so much.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, what sort of things did the university have in place to try to kind of address some of these issues?
Um, I think the definitely like changing event timings to try and accommodate for commuter students was a big thing. You know, having things on Wednesday afternoons, which is usually people don't have lectures on Wednesdays at all, and if they do, it's usually only in the morning. So having the Wednesdays free opened up a slot for the commuter student. And then more generally with cost of living, there are, you know, often free events, not always, but there are certain events which are free, which, you know, can be a bit more accommodating to people. Um, but yeah.
So a lot of this sounds like there's sort of practical barriers which you can kind of overcome by changing the time or finding sort of free things. But I also understand that it's quite a kind of there's some stigma associated with loneliness. Were there any barriers around that in terms of taking part?
I think with the like even discussing the loneliness, a lot of people weren't really, or they assumed like it was just them, or they didn't realize the extent to which everyone else was feeling loneliness. I would say with most of the responses, um, you know, students did experience or did say that they felt lonely at points in university, but you know, they wouldn't assume that everyone else would have also experienced that because especially like with the use of social media, you know, you see everyone's going out or everyone's doing this event, and you don't expect that, you know, they also behind closed doors are struggling with the certain things that you might be struggling with. So yeah, I think there is more conversation needs to be had, especially with the younger generations, about what loneliness even is in the first place, and
Mhm.
you know what we can do about that.
Abby, would you like to jump in on that?
I think honestly, just sort of echoing Anissa's points that she made, just sort of destigmatizing it, because it's far too stigmatized in universities, especially with things like drinking culture and everything, where students who particularly from like different cultural backgrounds, international students, commuter students, just can't take part in the like intense drinking culture of university, for example. And again, I think for our responses from Surrey, the main thing was commuter students. And I think we found out after we conducted the interviews, I think it's around 40% of our student population are commuters, which is
Wow.
an insanely high percentage.
Mm.
And if they can't access these events and if they can't access these opportunities for social connections, then yeah, practical barriers are very much there and they very much need to be torn down.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, talk to me about tearing them down. What were sort of some of the solutions which you co-produced with the students you interviewed?
Um, Not necessarily with the students we interviewed as much. I think they were very much like, okay, we need third person spaces that don't involve paying money. I think their solutions were very much centered towards the cost of living crisis,
Right.
as opposed to I guess more community-based solutions. But something we came up with at the SOAS collaborative meeting back in February, I believe it was, particularly with the Surrey group of us, was creating this sort of online community for
Mm.
commuter students, whether that would be through like WhatsApp, Teams, or something, but just something really simple that could be easily implemented before Freshers Week or something, just so commuter students could have people to talk to. Say now they're doing the same transport links, just want somebody to sit by on the train home. It's dark, it's unsafe, like just somebody to sort of be there. And I think just little implementations like that would be absolutely brilliant.
So you mentioned there that you got together with the SOA students. So could you talk a little bit about the sort of process of the research after you'd done the intercept interviews, how you took it forward?
Yeah, so after we conducted the intercept interviews, I think we had an meeting with Becca, one of the senior researchers that Anissa and me in particular worked with, and we just sort of looked at all. We had a huge spreadsheet on Google Docs with our intercept responses, and just sort of looked at that theme by theme that Rahav has gone through. So like the accommodation, the academic contexts, cost of living, and everything else, and sort of tore that down into analysis page by page. I think it ended up being about 10 pages long. Um, and then we went to SOAS, I believe, about a month or so later. And it was absolutely brilliant format set up by Helen and Marnie, I believe, from Neighbourly Lab. And they had like post-it notes all across the room. And we were forced to sort of sit in tables with people we didn't know and sort of try and co-design solutions around the room and vote for our favourite ideas. And yeah, it was a very fun interactive format.
I've also been subjected to that
Yes.
previously, so I know where you're coming from.
We had a meeting at Surrey yesterday and the post-it note stickers came back out and they were all on the boards as well.
So a question for all three of you, and please just sort of jump in when you feel like it. Why do you think the sort of methodological approach of using peer researchers to talk about loneliness in universities is a valuable way to address this issue in particular?
I can start. So from my own experience, I think one of the reasons why the success in how many responses we got was because when we were approaching students, they felt already open to us because you could tell that we are also students at the university since our university is campus based. So every young person there is probably a student. And so they were already open to the conversation. And then when they simply mention certain places or their own experiences, we could relate to them because we also experienced them. And so this kind of made the conversation very easygoing, where we could add things from ourselves and they can respond to that. So we were just able to maintain this conversation and openness and go into more depth each minute the
Mhm.
interview was going on.
And did you find that you were sort of bringing your own experience and your own understanding of that context to those conversations?
Yes, in fact, I think that some students in particular, they wanted to know our experience as well, because this is what would allow for them to feel more open to us. Sometimes they would ask us questions in return, maybe because they wanted to know who is the person they're talking to. And
Mm.
by knowing us more, they were open to share about themselves more as well.
Mhm. Abby and Anissa, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think definitely like echoing what Anna said, I think, having the peer researchers, people feel a lot more comfortable talking to you and expressing their views because you're a safe person. Like it's not going to some like senior leader, or it's not going to some random person with some random organization. It's going to a student on campus who's part of the community that they're part of. And even just like knowing the infrastructure of the uni, that like really helped. I remember there were times where like we were figuring out like what area of the campus should we go to. If like Becca had been there herself, she wouldn't have known, oh, this is a hotspot where students are. This is also where students are. You know, this area has people that sit on benches. Like this is these little things that we know about. And even, you know, we can prompt people. We were able to prompt people in different ways when we were asking the questions to them. You know, they could mention an area on campus or a specific module or a specific lecture, for example, and you know, we can relate to them. We can, you know, ask them the right questions and get better responses out of them.
Absolutely. Abby, have you got anything to add on that?
I don't think I've got too much other than what Anna and Nisa have already said, but just I think peer research as a methodology is just so valuable because of how like authentic it is and how willing, especially with students with sensitive topics like loneliness and cost of living, are willing to open up to you because they know that you've sort of been through it yourself. Like I remember having really good conversations. And in one instance, I ended up getting a girl's Instagram because she really enjoyed talking to me, and she was like, "Oh, can I have your socials?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, sure." So yeah, it was just absolutely brilliant to sort of really get the lived experience in an authentic way, and you could tell it wasn't like a fabricated response, and that it was just entirely genuine to the
Mm.
students.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it sounds like even sort of having a conversation about it with someone goes some way to kind of addressing it because, you know, they feel like they're being heard. They feel like there's a kind of there's someone who's interested in that and that they are kind of able to share that with someone who wants to talk about it. You know, that's kind of nice in and of itself. Um, I suppose one of my questions, and this is a slightly trickier question, um, student loneliness is an issue. You know, it's sort of quite ingrained. Not it's not something which we can get rid of. You know, it's always going to be there. What do you think are kind of what's realistically possible? What can we actually make an impact on in this space? What was sort of success for you in with this piece of research?
Yeah, I think linking back to what Abby said, I think one of the biggest things we can do is like destigmatize loneliness.
Mhm.
Even, you know, we'd speak to these people for 10, 15 minutes and you could tell that they, you know, felt better about, you know, what their struggles are, their experiences were. And, you know, if we can't, you know, magically add more money into the pot, we can't change these huge things about universities and things like that. But if there's one like practical small step that we can make, it is talking about it, you know, making people feel seen, heard, and understood, and you know that they're not alone and that it's normal and that you know pretty much everyone is in the same boat as you if you know look around and you know speak to people about it.
But it also sounds like you know, you were very thorough with the number of students you spoke to, and that, you know, it makes a really sort of strong case for actually communicating
Yeah.
the experience of students, right?
Yeah, there was one guy I spoke to. I sat with him for about half an hour, and he would have stayed there for hours if I if I'd let him. But you know, it's people are lacking that sense of community. You know, people just need other people to talk to.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the hardest bit can sometimes be just making that first step. You know, the fact that we were able to go and approach people
Mhm.
was easier. Like people felt comfortable because we were the ones talking to them.
Mhm. Anna and Abby, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes, I would just say that on the research side of things, I think one of the most valuable things about this project is that it would be a data-driven
Mhm.
implementation of change. So, for example, we presented our data to the senior leadership team at our university, and they were extremely curious and interested in knowing more about the responses that we received from students. And I think just giving this information to people who are in charge and who are actually capable of implementing change is what makes it so valuable.
Mm, absolutely. Um, well, I suppose so. We've got lots of questions in the chat. I would just like to ask you one more question. I mean, I know that this is something which universities are very alive to, and there are teams within universities dedicated to kind of trying to increase connection between students. And if someone from a university was watching this, and you could sort of give them one piece of advice or one big thing you'd like to change within your university setting, what would that be? Sorry, I know it's cruel to try and kind of distill all of this rich work into one headline, but also useful.
I think again, just being more open and honest about the realities, and lecturers, opening these conversations up themselves can be helpful. I think, at least like from my experience at uni, I always find the lecturers that are the most, raw and honest and just kind of relatable to students. One, they have better, more engaging lectures, but also you feel more comfortable with them. I know that I can go and speak to them if I have any issues. So I think, creating that community yourself as a lecturer, forcing people to talk to each other in your lectures or your seminars, or making sure there's group work and things like that. Because I think it's students, like the young people, they aren't very proactive about these things, unfortunately. So I think sometimes the forced efforts from the academic staff can sometimes could be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just sort of stating it as an issue can go some way to kind of reduce the stigma, get people talking about it, and yeah, kind of getting it more on the agenda. Anna and Abby?
Well, maybe also relating to stigma, if our university, for example, continued the research on their own, just maybe by implementing surveys, asking students about their experience, this would just make the subject more, I should say, commonplace, but also, again, collect this data so that the people who are in charge of making changes would actually be informed about the true feelings of students.
Thank you so much. Abby?
Yeah, I guess just in a sense, sort of carrying on the conversation about loneliness and making sure that it doesn't die out. Like, it's been really valuable from taking part in this project. Like, we finished the interviews back in January, yet conversation is still taking place, and the universities are still looking to implement solutions. And I think, yeah, just really practical. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to come up with a solution like one absolute needs to be done, because I think there's so many little things to just make everything more accessible. But yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now to questions from the chat. First one is from Gillian, which you're welcome to unmute and ask yourself, Gillian, if you'd like to, or I can do it. Happy either way.
I'm just about finished my lunch. If you want to ask the first one, I have more that I can ask.
Okay, no problem. So it's a logistical question. How and where did we recruit the students which we interviewed? Rahaf, I think that you might be able to field that one. Although Anissa, Anna, and Abby, you will also know where you were recruited and interviewed, of course.
Yeah, thank you. I think what we did is, so we worked with staff from universities as well, and we got their help in publicizing and trying to recruit students. So they put out kind of an advertisement, I guess, to for students who are interested in participating in this research. But yeah, we couldn't have done it without the staff involved in the university.
Thank you. And Anna, Abby, and Anissa,
Sorry,
how
did they put something in their lectures, or they put it online, or?
So usually each university has like an employment
Career
section.
service.
It's career service. Yeah, thank you, Anna. And they posted these kind of advertisement on the career service website, or these kinds of channels.
Did they get paid?
Yes, of course.
Well,
you say,
it's
of
nice to
course,
hear
I do research all the time and I don't pay participants. So,
I was
Oh
going to
yeah,
say
but
that,
we had to kind of make sure that that was covered as part of the research project, that all people are compensated. fairly.
I know what you mean, Gillian. It's nice to hear you say, of course, Rahaf, but I think that's far from common practice. Um, Abby and Anissa, did you also hear about it through the career service?
I think it was uploaded onto like the student union's like job posting, but then also at the beginning of one of our lectures, one of the lecturers had it as like the slide before the lecture started and was like, "This is a job opportunity. Scan the QR code." And I found it through there.
Yeah.
And sorry, I have endless questions apparently. Did you talk to each student individually, or was it sort of a focus group kind of situation?
Okay, I can take that one. So we did a training, and the training had all the students in that. So I guess it was like a small group of students that we trained all together. But then me and Becca, who was a researcher in Neighbourly Lab, we went out with I guess 2 pairs of students in each university to do the research.
And can I ask what was covered in the training? And Rahaf, either you can answer that or Anissa, Anna, and Abby.
I'll hand it over to the researchers.
I guess the main thing that I think the training was over 3 days, and it started looking at the absolute basics of methodology, not even intercept interviews, but just sort of different qualitative interviews that take place, different methodologies. Then, when it got into the specifics, we looked at sort of the ethics behind intercept interviews, and how, in a practical sense, like note taking and everything, recording, consent. I've definitely missed something out, but yeah, everything regarding ethics and consent was covered during the training.
Well, this actually it leads us nicely on to one of Hannah's questions in the chat, and that was just how did you find the training before you started the data collection? What else was covered? What was particularly useful as well?
Oh, go on, Anissa.
I think the training was very, very thorough, which made like the act through like conducting the actual interview so much easier. Like the team at Neighbourly Lab, they went through essentially everything that we could have needed to know. Like with the GDPR training, it was, you know, what to do if someone says something slightly concerning, who to contact, what to do if, you know, you're not getting a response out of someone, how to ask like follow-up questions. Everything was covered like so comprehensively, and it made the experience so much easier. So yeah, it was just it was so easy to ask like conduct the interviews. And I think it's just the team was like one of the main factors. You know, they made it so engaging, different styles of, you know, teaching us throughout because it was quite lengthy meeting. So yeah, props to them.
And I mean, you sort of referenced this, but you feel like you were kind of supported through the process and were sort of never in a position where you felt kind of uncomfortable or, you know, that you were having a difficult conversation with someone. Because, of course, talking about loneliness can kind of lead to some slightly difficult places, but you felt like you kind of knew what to do in those situations and were supported in those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. I think I remember when we first started, Becca, who was our other researcher with us, she like kind of led the first 2 interviews and let us observe. So once we got the hang of it, she kind of said, "I'll come with you if you want, but if you want to do it yourself, do it yourself," and was always there to kind of support us throughout.
Did any of those difficult things that you talked about beforehand in the training actually happen? Like, did you have to deal with someone who seemed very upset, or I don't know, any of that? How much problem solving did you have to do during the intercepts?
Well, our group personally didn't experience such challenges. The worst thing that could happen is just for them to decline to participate. But even these cases, they were very rare. Most people actually agreed to participate. I remember it wasn't a situation with me, but another peer researcher who was in my group. One student asked her whether she thinks that he's lonely. So he was kind of offended by the question regarding loneliness. So I suppose he took it personally, but I think she managed it quite well and she reassured him that it's only for research purposes. Um, yeah.
I'm confused. That sounds like you were like approaching people to ask them to participate, whereas I thought you said earlier that you were
Right.
advertising
Yes.
ahead of time.
Oh,
So,
sorry. I think I see the confusion here. So the peer researchers were recruited through advertisements and entering,
Ah,
but the research that they were doing, they
yeah,
were
I meant the people who were giving the responses. How were
yes.
they recruited?
So they
Oh,
were
okay. Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
They were intercept interviews. So our peer researchers went out in teams and well, actually, perhaps you can talk about how you found that process of doing intercept interviews.
Are you talking to me, Tam?
This is also why I was confused about paying. Of course, you're paying these lovely
Exactly.
people,
That's
but
what I
not the
was
people who are
thinking. We
answering your
definitely did
questions, I
not pay them.
assume. Yeah, okay. We're on the same page now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So basically, we went out into the universities as pairs. So we had two students from each university, worked with four universities. We went as pairs. Each pair had a researcher from Neighbourly Lab for safeguarding issues, for any kind of issues that they might face, and also to just kind of do this thing together. And we started talking to people who are hanging out in cafes, outside of lectures, in the library, and just going through kind of a survey type of questionnaire with them. So that's how we approached them. But the recruitment of the peer researchers themselves, which are Anna, Abby, and Anissa, and other students, was advertised as a job because it's part of the methodology.
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
I can see another question from Hannah in the chat around where Neighbourly Lab uses peer researchers in other settings. Yes, absolutely. We use them in lots of different settings. One example that springs to mind recently, we are part of the Welcome Coalition, which is a sort of coalition of organisations who do research around welcome and around migrants and newcomers and asylum seekers and refugees. And we have used peer researchers to do a lot of that research. I'll post something in the chat so that you can follow up on it. But yes, peer researchers are great and relevant in many different contexts. Any other questions from attendees for Anna, Anissa, and Abby?
I have questions, but I don't want to jump the queue if someone else does.
Oh, go on, Gillian. Don't worry about it.
Okay, the first one is for Anissa, because you mentioned this particularly, Wednesdays and having events on Wednesdays made it so that more commuter students were able to attend them. I guess I was wondering, like, will they just not bother commuting into campus if there's no classes on that day? Do you know what I mean? Like, if it means an extra trip into campus just to attend a social event, are people going to do it?
Yeah, I think that's a completely like valid concern. And I think sometimes that is the case, but also sometimes like I think the whole like culture of university is that Wednesdays is like the designated sports days, it's the designated day. So people like do make the effort. I think especially during like Freshers Week specifically, like that's like during Freshers Week, people, kind of try the societies out, see what they like, and then, make it like a regular thing that they'll go and attend these things on the specific day, which was also like an issue that we found. If people missed Freshers Week, they struggled to catch up afterwards. But I think for those that did attend Freshers and found their societies, once they did find that little hub, they would like make it consistent. I'll be there on the Wednesday. But yeah, that is like a big a thing that came up, that people, they didn't have lectures or anything going on, or if they only had like one lecture in the morning, it wasn't worth their time or money to come into uni at all. So yeah, again, I think that is a concern.
Great, thank you. Um, as someone who works at a university, I'm always like, I don't know what students would do. Like sometimes, we think, oh, I should make this change, but then you ask students, and for example, I was teaching a class and I was holding these drop-in sessions, and nobody was coming, and I thought, okay, maybe it's the wrong time. Maybe there's things I could do to make it more appealing. And I did my own kind of like evaluations at the end of the class, and I said, have you come? If not, why not? And I gave them a few options, and one of them was like, just I'm lazy, right? Like no judgment, just like I'm just not ever going to come regardless of what you do. And that and people were honest, and they told me, yeah, like it doesn't, it's just, I'm just not interested. It's not, so I was like, okay, that's what I needed to know, right? So sometimes, we go to all these efforts to make changes thinking, oh, this is going to be the thing, but it's just really important to ask students so we know if that change is actually going to make a difference, right? So thank you for that answer. I think that's really helpful. I also have a question about societies because yeah, what did you find like in terms of barriers for societies? Is there anything societies could be doing better, or did you see any like good practice? Because I'm hearing from students, they understand that societies are a great opportunity to meet other people, but some of them, cost money, and that's a barrier. Others, people are like, well, I want to go, but I don't know anybody. And so I had this friend who was going to go with me, but then they couldn't go. And so I didn't go. And then, I think people feel, oh, that door is closed now and I can't. So yeah, I'm just curious if you have any thoughts and sort of solutions and ideas around that kind of thing.
So you actually voiced the concerns that were mentioned the most regarding the societies in our interviews. I would just add that one more concern was related to pre-formed groups within the societies. So let's say I'm going there alone as an individual and I already see these pre-formed groups of people and I just feel excluded from the start. And it's very hard then to get into these societies.
Yeah. And were there any sort of solutions or ideas about what to do about some of these barriers?
Yeah, well, there was a financial one regarding the membership. So to reduce the membership or maybe make more events freely available. Another one was, for example, to find a body before the start of university, especially. So there would be group chats, for example, for undergraduates who are entering their first year, where they would find people even before coming to university that they could connect with. And then I suppose they just could go together to the social events, already having that group where they know they would belong to.
I actually that just touching on that, social media obviously looms quite large in the university experience. That sounds like quite a positive use of it. Could you talk a little bit about the role of social media in tackling loneliness at university? The good and the bad, I suppose.
Yeah, so the good use of it was creating groups for specific social groups, such as commuters, first year undergraduates, and especially postgraduates, because they felt quite excluded from social life as well. Um, on the negative note, I don't think our respondents mentioned anything, maybe because we didn't ask them the question from that side, but I think it would be really interesting to explore whether social media affects their socialization in a negative way.
Just jumping on here, I think some of the negatives that were mentioned of social media was regarding the information that was shared. So there were a lot of social media groups that would share different things. There wasn't really a centralized method of communication, and there was kind of an unequal distribution. So some students really loved social media and using it and found out a lot about events through social media, but others weren't as active on these platforms. So accommodating different students. And on your point, Jillian, it's kind of challenging to know what works with students. So, and then like this approach of always trying to ask questions, but also maybe trying to involve a student themselves to ask these questions has been really helpful to kind of get to these solutions. But also, a lot of students actually mentioned they needed to be more proactive in socializing. But then also, when they would think about being proactive and they would kind of engage more deeply with these questions, they found out that there are barriers to why they feel lazy or why they don't want to engage with these kind of social events. Yeah.
Gaetano, can I ask you a question? Because you brought up the welcoming in terms of other projects that Neighbourly Lab is doing. Is there anything that you've learned in those projects that could be helpful in terms of societies? I'm just thinking like about what Anna said about, preformed groups. My feeling is like what we need to have is people kind of looking out for newcomers and saying, "Hey, come join us." But like, I guess I'm wondering if there's anything specific that's come up for you guys and other groups that might apply in this circumstance. And I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
see Allison has a question in the chat, and I'm just totally monopolizing the chat. So please answer her question after this.
of course. Yeah. No, it's a really, really good question. I mean, I think that I suppose what I would kind of draw out as relevant from some of our other work is around how you create welcome spaces. And for example, we're doing some work at the moment evaluating the GLA's Loved and Wanted project, which, if you haven't heard of it, is these sort of 30 warm anchor welcome spaces throughout London. And we're looking at how they kind of, what sort of things they do to facilitate social cohesion and help people sort of mix and match in those spaces. And there's a lot of stuff to do with the sort of physical setup of the space. It's sort of open, it's accessible, it's available. There are communal seating areas, perhaps food and drink is served there. There's information which is accessible. Perhaps there are sort of values in the space which are communicated around it being a welcoming space. And then there are the sort of more active things which you can do around implementing those values and around having sort of staff and volunteers in those space who are kind of trained to create a welcoming space and to bring people in. And also around, I mean, how do you create a welcoming environment? It's about a kind of creating a group identity which everyone in that space subscribes to and feels sort of connected to and perpetuates themselves. And it's a difficult thing to do, but I think that it's about those people who are more comfortable in that space and who've maybe been there longer in the case of societies, and just really trying to kind of reinforce that with newcomers and with everyone else in that group. So I think it's really, a lot of it is about the sort of the people there and them working very hard to make it welcoming, which, is not an easy thing to do, obviously, and it's why we're having this conversation. I hope that answers your question. Alison has asked, we've got time just for one more, I think. This one for Anissa, Anna, and Abby. Alison works for a loneliness charity, and they provide a social group to bring people together with a high level of staff involvement, so everyone is welcomed and has a conversation, which is kind of the point I was making there. Thank you, Alison. Thinking of replicating that at your local uni with students facilitating it, and wondered what you thought about that. Abby, perhaps I can bring you on this one.
Yeah, I think that would be absolutely valuable to replicate that in a university setting. Because I know for Surrey ourselves, separate to the loneliness project, we've recently implemented a Future Leaders program, which essentially is looking at underrepresented groups at university, whether that's from a lower SES background, whether that's social mobility, migrant background, and essentially what the Future Leaders program does is hosts events for these groups, and they're run by student champions from each of these backgrounds, constantly giving feedback as to what works with the events, what doesn't. And so far, they've had a really positive feedback for this. So I think implementing social groups in a university setting similar to this would be very, very valuable.
Well, we're approaching time. Thank you so much to Anissa, Anna, and Abby for taking the time to come and speak to us. It's been really, really interesting, and a really valuable conversation from my perspective, and I hope from everyone else's. So yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for
Can you
asking.
just say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for kind of coming, and it was really nice to see kind of everyone being so excited about this as we were. But I also wanted to point out if Jillian or Alison, you have kind of more questions, would be happy to kind of chat with you privately if you'd like. I don't know, Tano, if you want to share kind of Marnie's or my email or just our details so they can be in touch.
Yeah, perhaps if you just send an email to the community manager inbox at Neighbourly Lab, I will direct you. But yeah, as I say, this recording will get put up on the hub, so please feel free to share it with colleagues. And equally, they're very welcome to get in touch, and we can have a separate chat about this research too. But yeah, thanks everyone. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Great job.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.